think you know evil. You think it's some cackling villain in a darkened room twisting a handlebar moustache. You think it's a grand theatrical spectacle, easy to spot and easy to despise. Well, let me tell you, you've been fed a lie. A comfortable, dangerous lie. Because what if I told you the most terrifying evil isn't something ordinary at all? What if it's terrifyingly, sickeningly normal? What if it dresses in a suit, punches a clock, and is just following orders? This week on The Observing Eye, we are diving into the mind of a woman who dared to look into the abyss of the 20th century, the age of mass graves and gas chambers, and told us what she saw. A woman who ripped open the concept of evil not to soften it, but to expose its most insidious form. Today we are talking about Hannah Arendt. She was a philosopher who didn't want to be called a philosopher, a political theorist who saw through the bullshit of abstract systems to the brutal reality of human existence. She was Jewish, German, stateless, and she lived through the very storm she dissected. She saw totalitarianism up close, felt its icy breath on her neck, and then she had the audacity, the sheer intellectual courage, to explain how it could happen. Not just what happened, but how the human spirit could be twisted, how societies could descend into absolute horror. Not just through grand schemes, but through the mundane, through the thoughtless, through the sheer soul-crushing lack of thinking. She didn't offer comfortable answers. She offered a mirror. A sharp, unforgiving mirror held up to ourselves. And what you see in it might make you squirm. This is about the wiring of tyranny, the psychology of complicity, and the terrifying power of simply not thinking. This is about understanding how seemingly decent people can become cogs in a machine of death, not because they're inherently evil, but because they abdicate their responsibility to judge. So if you're ready to ditch the fantasy and face the chilling reality of how the greatest evils can take root in the most banal of ways, then stick around, because Hannah Arendt is true pirate radio for your mind, blasting uncomfortable truths straight into your cranium. And you, Project Mayhem, can hear every goddamn word. Let's begin.
835 feet.
Alright, you've had the intro. Now let's peel back the skin and look at the raw nerves. Our first deep dive into the mind of Hannah Arendt takes us to the belly of the beast, her magnum opus, the origins of totalitarianism. Forget what you think you know about history. This isn't just a recounting of dates and battles. This is a forensic examination, a psychological autopsy of how entire societies can become playgrounds for unimaginable horror. Arendt wasn't just pointing fingers at Hitler and Stalin as isolated monsters. She was showing us the systemic, historical currents that made their rise not just possible, but in her analysis almost inevitable under certain conditions. She's dissecting the DNA of damnation. Now, let's be absolutely clear from the jump. Arendt makes a crucial distinction that most people completely miss. Totalitarianism is not merely tyranny. Tyranny is ancient. It's about a ruler, a despot, seizing absolute power, suppressing dissent, and ruling through fear. But even the most brutal tyrant still operates within certain limits, within the existing social and legal structures, however warped. There's still a distinction between the private and public sphere, even if the public one is under constant threat. A tyrant wants to control you. A totalitarian regime wants to remake you from the inside out. It wants to obliterate your very essence as an individual. Arendt argued that totalitarianism is a wholly new political form, a monstrous invention of the 20th century. It aims for total domination, not just over your actions, but over your thoughts, your relationships, your very capacity for spontaneity and newness. It seeks to eradicate what Arendt called plurality, the fundamental human condition that we are all distinct, unique individuals. Totalitarianism wants to dissolve this glorious individuality into a homogeneous, interchangeable mass. It wants you to be a predictable, obedient cog in the machine, stripped of your identity, your history, your name, your ability to think for yourself. It wants to reduce you to a living corpse even before it puts you in a ditch. So, how did humanity stumble into this fresh hell? Arendt traces its roots to two crucial pre-totalitarian movements simmering beneath the surface of the 19th century like festering wounds: anti-Semitism and imperialism. Let's start with anti-Semitism. This wasn't just about prejudice or hatred, though it was certainly that. For Arendt, 19th century anti-Semitism, particularly in its radical form, served as a crucial ideological preparation for totalitarianism. It provided a powerful, ready-made scapegoat, an enemy within that could be blamed for all societal ills, real or imagined. The Jews, for a host of complex historical reasons, became the archetypal, superfluous people in the eyes of radical nationalists and burgeoning totalitarian movements. They were portrayed as a clandestine force, pulling strings, undermining the purity of the nation. This wasn't about religious difference, it was about a conspiracy theory so grand, so all-encompassing, that it could explain everything and justify anything. What anti-Semitism did, crucially, was to dehumanize an entire population to the point where their suffering and eventual annihilation became a matter of logical necessity, a hygienic measure. If Jews were truly the root cause of all problems, if they were a disease on the body politic, then their elimination was not a crime, but a solution, a cleansing. This is the horrifying logic that paves the way for atrocity. It establishes a precedent. If one group can be declared superfluous and stripped of their rights, their humanity, their very right to exist, then who is next? The blueprint is laid. Then we have imperialism. This might sound like a strange bedfellow with anti-Semitism, but Arendt argued they were deeply intertwined. 19th century European imperialism, particularly the scramble for Africa and the unchecked expansion of colonial power, normalized violence, race thinking, and the concept of wealth and people on a global scale. In the colonies, European powers experimented with domination, with arbitrary rule, with the idea that certain populations were inherently inferior and could be exploited, displaced, or even eradicated for the sake of the superior race or nation. In the colonies, the rule of law often broke down. Brute force and administrative violence became the norm. Concentration camps in embryonic form were used against indigenous populations long before they became the industrial slaughterhouses of Europe. Arendt saw this export of lawlessness and violence, this justification of domination based on racial superiority, as a training ground for the totalitarian movements that would later turn these methods inward against their own populations. Imperialism accustomed people to the idea that certain lives held no value, that boundaries could be transgressed, and that power could be exercised without restraint or moral compunction. It provided the practical experience and the ideological precedent for the systematic cruelty that would follow. These were the historical forces, the dark currents that churned beneath the surface. But how does this translate into full-blown totalitarianism? Arendt points to two primary interlocking mechanisms: terror and ideology. Let's dissect terror first. This isn't just about the secret police or the threat of violence. Totalitarian terror is something far more pervasive. It's about maintaining a constant, omnipresent, arbitrary fear that atomizes individuals. It doesn't just target the regime's enemies, it targets everyone. No one is safe, no one is truly innocent. This constant, unpredictable threat shatters all social bonds, all trust between people. You can't trust your neighbor, your friend, even your family, because anyone could be an informer, or simply be deemed superfluous on a whim. The purpose of this terror is not just to suppress dissent, it's to prevent any kind of spontaneity, any unexpected action, any genuine interaction between people. It's designed to isolate every single individual, to make them utterly alone and therefore utterly powerless. When you're constantly afraid, constantly isolated, you cease to be a political being. You become a mere bundle of reactions, easily manipulated and easily led. Your unique who is replaced by a predictable what. The camps for Arendt were the ultimate expression of this terror. Places where human identity was systematically stripped away, where people were reduced to bare life, living proof that anything is possible when human freedom is obliterated. And then there's ideology. This isn't just a set of beliefs you happen to hold. For Arendt, totalitarian ideology is a closed, self-referential system of logical consistency that claims to explain everything, predict everything, and justify everything. It's a fabricated reality that completely replaces genuine experience and independent thought. The ideology operates with an iron logic. If X is true, then Y must follow, and therefore Z is justified. If the ideology claims that history is a struggle of races destined for a final conflict, then the systematic extermination of a lower race isn't a crime, it's a natural outcome, a logical necessity. If the ideology dictates that all economic history points towards a classless society achieved through violent revolution, then mass purges and forced labour aren't atrocities, they're merely accelerating the inevitable historical process. The terrifying thing about totalitarian ideology is that it demands not just belief, but a surrender of your entire capacity for independent thought. It's more real than reality itself. If your eyes tell you one thing, but the ideology tells you another, the ideology must be right. Your experience, your common sense, your moral compass, all must be subjugated to the truth of the ideology. It creates a hermetically sealed world where outside facts are irrelevant and internal contradictions are explained away by ever more convoluted logic. This is how people can participate in unspeakable acts without a shred of moral doubt, because the ideology has provided them with an alternative reality where those acts are not only permissible, but necessary. The combination of total terror and total ideology creates a society where the individual is utterly dissolved. The unique, unpredictable nature of human beings, our capacity for action, for starting something new, is seen as a threat to the smooth functioning of the ideological machine. Totalitarianism seeks to eliminate this spontaneity to make human behavior as predictable as the movements of nature or the unfolding of predetermined historical process. So, when you read The Origins of Totalitarianism, you're not just reading history, you're reading a warning. A warning about the seductive power of grand narratives that promise ultimate solutions, about the dangers of dehumanizing others, and about the threat to freedom when individuals surrender their capacity for independent thought and moral judgment. Arendt showed us the dark alchemy by which human beings can be transformed from unique individuals into interchangeable units, ready for the grinder. This isn't just history, this is the blueprint for how it can always happen again. And the first step to stopping it is understanding it. We've wrestled with the origins, seen the terrifying architecture of totalitarianism built with terror and ideology. Now let's talk about the people who build it, the cogs in that monstrous machine. And this is where Hannah Arendt drops a bombshell that still rattles today: the banality of evil. This concept exploded onto the world stage from a Jerusalem courtroom in 1961. Arendt was there, sent by the New Yorker to cover the trial of Adolf Eichmann. You've probably heard the name. He's the man responsible for the logistics of the Holocaust, the architect of the trains that delivered millions to their deaths. The common expectation, the public hunger, was for a monster, a demonic, sadistic, rabidly anti-Semitic figure, twisted by pure malice. The world wanted to see evil personified, a theatrical villain worthy of the scale of his crimes. But Arendt saw something else, something far more unsettling. She saw a man who was, in her words, terrifyingly normal. Eichmann in the courtroom wasn't foaming at the mouth. He wasn't raging with hatred. He was a middling bureaucrat, a meticulous record keeper, a man obsessed with efficiency, punctuality, and following orders. He spoke in clichés, in administrative jargon, in platitudes about duty and loyalty. He seemed, to Arendt, profoundly superficial, utterly lacking in depth or original thought. He wasn't an ideologue in the fanatical sense, he was a functionary. He wasn't a passionate anti-Semite driven by a burning hatred. He was a man who saw his job as moving trains on time, filling out forms correctly, and adhering to directives from his superiors. And this is what shocked the world. Arendt wasn't saying Eichmann was innocent. She was saying that the perpetrator of unimaginable evil wasn't necessarily a unique, psychologically warped individual, but a bland, thoughtless paper pusher. The banality of evil is not about the deeds being banal. The deeds were monstrous beyond comprehension. It's about the doer. It's about the realization that the greatest evils can be committed by ordinary people who simply fail to think, who abdicate their personal responsibility, who become absorbed in their tasks, their careers, their systems, to the exclusion of any moral judgment whatsoever. Let's unpack this. What does thoughtlessness mean in this context? It's not about stupidity. Eichmann wasn't unintelligent, he was simply unreflective. He was incapable of genuine empathy, not because he was a sadist, but because he couldn't step outside his own narrow administrative perspective. He couldn't imagine himself in the place of his victims. He couldn't apply universal moral principles to the specific circumstances of his actions. He was a man disconnected from reality, living in a bubble of regulations, career advancement, and the will of the Führer. His language itself revealed this thoughtlessness. Arendt noted his constant reliance on bureaucratic jargon and euphemisms, resettlement, final solution, special treatment. These were not just clever disguises, they were a way of avoiding the horrific reality of what he was doing. They allowed him to mentally distance himself from the gassing of children, to frame it as a logistical problem, a matter of transport capacity. This is the chilling power of language to obscure, to sanitize, to make the unspeakable seem merely administrative. Arendt argued that Eichmann's evil wasn't a product of malevolence, but of a profound lack of judgment. He simply failed to engage in the process of independent moral thought. He never asked, is this right? Should I be doing this? What are the consequences of my actions? Instead, his guiding principle was simple obedience. I was just doing my duty. His conscience, if it existed, was entirely bound by the law as dictated by the regime. When the law shifted from persecuting to exterminating, his duty shifted with it. This insight shattered comfortable notions of good and evil. If evil is merely a monstrous aberration, then we can easily distance ourselves from it. We can say, that's them, not us. But if evil can be banal, if it can arise from the lack of thought in an otherwise normal person, then it means we all carry the potential for complicity. It means the line between perpetrator and bystander, between us and them, becomes horrifyingly thin. This is a direct challenge to the idea that people commit evil acts because they are inherently bad or suffer from some profound psychological defect. Arendt's point was that the capacity for evil lies in the failure to exercise our capacity for critical judgment, for asking fundamental moral questions, for resisting the herd mentality, and refusing to be swept along by a system, no matter how powerful. The banality of evil also points to the dangers of mass society. In a totalitarian system, the individual is stripped of their political agency, their ability to act meaningfully in the public sphere. They are atomized, isolated, and then absorbed into the faceless collective. In such a system, independent thought becomes not just dangerous, but often literally impossible, as channels for dissent are eliminated and the public space for deliberation is destroyed. When everyone is a replaceable unit, when individuality is suppressed, the capacity for genuine moral choice withers. Consider the implications for our own lives. How often do we just follow orders without thinking? How often do we outsource our moral judgment to institutions, to experts, to the latest trending opinion? How often do we retreat into our private lives, locked in a world of consumerism and entertainment, and leave the important questions of the public world to others? Arendt's warning isn't just about the Third Reich, it's a timeless indictment of intellectual laziness and moral abdication. She's telling us that the greatest bulwark against evil isn't just a strong moral compass, but an active mind, a mind that questions, that challenges, that resists the seductive ease of conformity, a mind that refuses to surrender its capacity for judgment no matter how complex or uncomfortable the situation. So when you hear about Eichmann, don't just see a monster. See a terrifying reflection of what happens when people stop thinking, when they become obsessed with process over purpose, with efficiency over ethics, with loyalty to a system over loyalty to humanity. The banality of evil is the chilling truth that you don't need a grand evil plan to unleash hell on earth. You just need enough people to stop asking why. And that is a lesson we can never afford to forget. Because the seeds of that banality are always waiting to sprout in any society, in any human heart that chooses thoughtlessness over judgment. Don't let it be yours. We've journeyed into the dark heart of totalitarianism with Arendt, and we've stared into the chilling void of the banal evil that lubricates its gears. Now we're going to shift pace. We're going to delve into what Arendt considered the very essence of human existence, the bedrock upon which genuine freedom and a meaningful public life are built. We're talking about the human condition, her monumental exploration of labour, work, and action. This book is a profound lament for what she saw as the inversion of human values in modern society. Arendt was effectively screaming, "We've got it all backwards. We're prioritising the animalistic over the truly human, the transient over the enduring, and the private over the vital public." Understanding these distinctions is crucial to grasping her critique of our world and her deep concern about the decline of the political. Let's break it down. First, there's labour. Think of this as the relentless cyclical activity of the animal laborans, the human as a biological being, driven by necessity. Labour is about survival. It's the effort we expend to maintain our individual lives and the life of the species. Eating, drinking, sleeping, fucking, farming, cooking, cleaning, these are all forms of labour. It's the endless treadmill of satisfying our immediate bodily needs and the needs of our biological existence. The key characteristic of labour is its futility in terms of producing anything lasting. The food you eat is consumed, the clean house gets dirty again, the clothes you wear eventually wear out. Labour is bound to the life process. It's a continuous, repetitive cycle of production and consumption that leaves no permanent trace. It's the activity by which human beings remain alive, but it doesn't create a world that endures beyond the individual life. It's a never-ending process, a Sisyphean task. In modern society, Arendt saw this sphere as vastly expanded, consuming more and more of our time and attention, driven by endless consumption and economic growth. We're trapped in the cycle of earning a living, often with little thought for anything beyond the next paycheck or the next purchase. Next, we have work. This is a fundamentally different beast. Work is the activity of the Homo faber, the human as a builder, a craftsman, a creator. Work produces durable objects, things that have a clear beginning and end, and that populate and build our shared artificial world. Think of a carpenter building a table, an artist painting a masterpiece, an architect designing a building. The products of work are distinct from the fleeting products of labour. A table, a painting, a building, these are meant to last. They create a stable, tangible human artifice, a world that stands against the transience of individual lives. This world of objects provides a framework, a sense of permanence within which human lives can unfold. It creates a space for human action and interaction. When you look at a city, a bridge, a tool, that's the result of work. It is the activity by which humans create a culture, a civilization, a backdrop against the ever-changing flow of life. Work gives form to raw material and creates a shared, objective reality that exists independently of any single individual's life or death. But for Arendt, the highest, most distinctively human activity, the one that truly sets us apart and allows for genuine freedom, is action. This is the activity of the vita activa in its truest sense, the active life of the citizen. Action happens exclusively in the public realm, between people in a web of relationships. It is about speaking and persuading, initiating something new, revealing who you are, not what you are, and engaging in collective political life. Action, unlike labour and work, is fundamentally unpredictable. You cannot control the outcome of an action in the way you can control the outcome of building a table, for example. When you speak, when you persuade, when you initiate a new policy or a new movement, you unleash a chain of events that ripples through the public sphere, intersecting with the actions and intentions of others. This unpredictability is precisely what makes it the realm of freedom. To act is to step into the unknown, to reveal your unique perspective, to initiate something new that couldn't have been predicted or compelled. Crucially, action is tied to plurality. The fact that we are all distinct and unique individuals, equal in our humanity yet different in our perspectives, is what makes action possible and meaningful. It's in the coming together of these distinct voices and perspectives, in debate and deliberation, that a truly shared reality is forged and new possibilities are initiated. When we act, we reveal our unique who to others. We differentiate ourselves. We show what makes us distinct. This revelation of who we are is what gives meaning to our political lives. Arendt lamented what she saw as the disastrous modern inversion of this hierarchy. She argued that in contemporary society, the values of labour and work have come to dominate, while the supreme value of action has been diminished, even effectively extinguished. We are increasingly defined by our roles as consumers and producers, by our economic activity, by the endless cycle of satisfying needs and desires. The public realm, the space for meaningful political action, has shrunk, becoming either a stage for manipulated spectacles or a mere administrative apparatus. She believed that the rise of the social realm was largely to blame for this decline. For Arendt, the social realm is a hybrid, a murky space where private concerns like economic well-being and welfare spill over into the public sphere, but without the true political deliberation and collective action that characterizes a genuine public realm. The social realm is about administration, about managing the life process of society, rather than about creating a space for freedom and new beginnings. It turns citizens into subjects of administration, concerned primarily with their well-being rather than their freedom. When the distinction between the private and public collapses into this undifferentiated social mass, where everyone is driven by similar needs and desires, the possibility of unique spontaneous action diminishes. We become a society of job holders and consumers, concerned primarily with our economic security and personal comfort, rather than active citizens engaged in shaping our common world. This withdrawal from the public realm, this retreat into the private, leaves a vacuum. And as we've already discussed, nature and power abhors a vacuum. An empty public sphere is ripe for totalitarian forces to fill, for ideologies to impose their logic, for terror to atomize. She wasn't advocating for a return to ancient Greece, but she was highlighting what we've lost: the ability to assemble freely, to speak without fear, to debate and persuade, to initiate new courses of action and create a shared political reality through our words and deeds. This is what she saw as the true essence of human freedom, and it is intrinsically linked to the existence of a vibrant public realm, a space where distinct individuals can meet, act, and reveal themselves to each other. So when you consider your own daily grind, ask yourself, how much of your life is consumed by labour, the endless cycle of earning and consuming? How much by work, creating things that endure? And how much by genuine action, engaging with others to initiate something new in the common world, to shape the reality you inhabit? Arendt's challenge is to re-evaluate our priorities, to reclaim the space for action, to understand that our deepest human potential lies not in our capacity to consume or even just to build, but in our unique ability to speak, to persuade, and to begin something new together in the unpredictable arena of the public realm. To truly live, she suggests, is to act. To be free is to act in concert with others. Don't let your existence be reduced to mere survival and consumption. Step into the arena. Speak. Act. That is where freedom truly resides. Alright, Project Mayhem. We've dissected the origins of that creeping totalitarian sickness, examined the unsettling truth of the banality of evil, and unpacked the foundational human condition: labour, work, and action. Now let's get down to the core of what Arendt saw as the beating heart of genuine human freedom: power, plurality, and the public realm. These are the vital organs of a healthy society, and when they atrophy, the whole body politic starts to fail. Let's start with power. Now, when you hear power, what's the first image that comes to mind? Probably a king on a throne, or dictator with an army, a CEO calling the shots. You think of domination, coercion, maybe violence. You think of power over others. Now, Arendt rips that definition to shreds. For her, that's not true power. That's violence, or strength, or force. True power, for Arendt, is not something an individual possesses. It is not a thing that can be hoarded or transferred. Power, she argues, arises only when people act in concert. It springs up between people, like a current generated by human interaction. It's the ability to act in common, to speak together, to persuade, to make things happen through collective agreement and shared understanding. Think of a group of citizens gathering to demand change, to initiate a new policy, to found a new institution. The power isn't in any single individual, it's in their collective capacity to act, to speak, and to influence. This is a profoundly different way of seeing things. If power is truly a product of collective action, then it cannot exist in isolation. A ruler who relies solely on violence or fear to control a populace does not wield power in Arendt's sense. They wield force. Real power, in her view, is fragile, dependent on ongoing recognition and support from those who grant it by their continued association. If people withdraw their support, if they refuse to act in concert, then power dissipates. This is why totalitarian regimes, despite their massive force, are constantly striving to atomize individuals, to prevent any independent collective action, because that collective action is the very source of power that could threaten them. Now, this concept of power is inextricably linked to plurality. Arendt hammered this point home. The human condition is characterized by plurality. We are all unique, distinct individuals. No two people are exactly alike. We come into this world as distinct beings, and it's this very uniqueness, this diversity of perspectives, experiences, and voices that makes human interaction meaningful and indeed makes action possible. Why is plurality so crucial? Because genuine politics, genuine freedom requires the interplay of different viewpoints. If everyone thought the same, if everyone acted in lockstep, there would be no need for deliberation, for persuasion, for the vibrant process of politics. Totalitarianism, as we discussed, seeks to destroy this plurality, to reduce individuals to a homogeneous mass, to eliminate dissent and make everyone conform to a single ideology. When plurality is suppressed, power in the Arendt sense, the power born of collective action and diverse voices, dies. What remains is only the coercive force of a singular will. The arena where this power and plurality can flourish is the public realm. This is perhaps one of Arendt's most vital and often misunderstood concepts. The public realm is not just a physical space like a town square or a forum, though it can manifest in such places. More fundamentally, it's a space of appearance, a shared space where individuals can appear before one another, reveal their unique who through words and deeds, and engage in meaningful political discourse. In the public realm, people transcend their private interests and concerns. They come together to deliberate on matters that affect the common good, to decide on how their shared world should be ordered. It is the space where opinions are formed through debate, where persuasion takes place, where new initiatives can be launched. It is the very foundation of freedom, because without a public space to act and speak, our capacity for political agency withers. Arendt contrasted this public realm with the private realm, and crucially, with the rise of the social realm. The private realm for Arendt is the sphere of the household, of personal relationships, of satisfying basic needs. It's the space where we retreat from public gaze, where we are anonymous and secure in our personal lives. It's necessary for life, but it's not where freedom in the political sense is realized. The problem for Arendt arose with the emergence and subsequent dominance of the social realm in modernity. This isn't a naturally occurring sphere, it's a modern phenomenon. The social realm, she argued, is where private concerns, particularly economic and administrative ones, spill over into the public sphere without true political deliberation. It's where the housekeeping of the nation, like economic management, welfare, administration of populations, becomes the primary focus of public life. Think of it, the rise of statistics, of mass movements, of bureaucracy. These focus on managing populations as if they were a single entity, on regulating behaviour, on ensuring efficiency and well-being. While these concerns are not inherently bad, Arendt warned that when they dominate the public sphere, they displace genuine political action. They treat people as objects to be managed rather than as subjects capable of initiating action. The social realm blurs the distinction between public and private life, leading to a kind of conformism where individual distinctness is lost and collective action is replaced by mass behaviour. In the social realm, opinion is not formed through open debate amongst diverse individuals. It is manufactured by mass media, by propaganda, by the pressure to conform. We become concerned with fitting in and with what everyone else is doing rather than with independent thought and action. This homogenization, this suppression of individual distinctness is precisely what totalitarianism capitalizes on. When the social realm eclipses the true public realm, the space for spontaneous, meaningful action shrinks, leaving a vacuum. This vacuum is what totalitarian regimes exploit. They don't just destroy the public realm, they fill the void created by its decline. Where there is no space for genuine political debate, for the appearance of unique individuals, the formation of power through collective action, the totalizing ideology steps in. It offers a false unity, a manufactured public life where everyone is integrated into a single overwhelming movement, but at the cost of all individuality and freedom. The masses, atomized and isolated by the disappearance of a true public space, become susceptible to the seductive promise of belonging, even if that belonging means surrendering their will entirely. So the lesson here is critical. The health of our freedom depends on the vitality of our public realm. It depends on our willingness to step out of our private comfort zones, to engage with others, to speak our minds, to listen to diverse perspectives, to debate, and to act in concert on matters of common concern. If we allow the public realm to be swallowed by private concerns or by the administrative machinery of the social, we lose the very space where power can be generated, where plurality can express itself, and where freedom can truly exist. Arendt's work is a bracing reminder. Freedom is not a given. It is not simply the absence of constraint. It is the capacity to act in concert with others in a shared public space. And that capacity, like a muscle, atrophies if not constantly exercised. Don't let your public muscle waste away, Project Mayhem. The tyranny of the social is subtle, insidious, and just as dangerous as any jackbooted thug. Engage, appear, act. That's where power truly lies. If you've stuck with us this far, you've waded through the muck of totalitarianism, confronted the chilling face of banal evil, and seen the vital distinctions Arendt draws between labour, work, and action. You've understood the power that springs from human plurality in a vibrant public realm. But after all that bleakness, you might be thinking, is there any hope? Does Arendt offer us anything but a grim diagnosis of societal decay? This is where we get to the surprising, even radical heart of Arendt's thought. Despite her unblinking gaze into the abyss, she was not a prophet of doom. Her work ultimately is an affirmation of human potential, grounded in two critical concepts that serve as the wellspring of hope in her philosophy: revolution and natality. Let's tackle revolution first. Now, forget the images of bloody street battles and guillotines. Arendt isn't glorifying violence. For her, true revolution in its purest form is not merely a rebellion or an uprising aimed at liberation from oppression, though liberation may be its necessary precondition. The purpose of revolution for Arendt is the founding of freedom. It's the spontaneous act of a people coming together to create a new political space, to establish new institutions that can protect and facilitate ongoing public action. She explores this in depth in her book On Revolution, where she famously contrasts the American Revolution with the French Revolution. Most people, particularly in Europe, view the French Revolution as the quintessential model, the radical overthrow, the popular uprising, the total transformation, eat the fucking rich. But Arendt saw it as a tragic failure, precisely because it ultimately succumbed to the social question, the overwhelming demands of poverty and necessity. The French Revolution, driven by the desperate plight of the masses, got sidetracked by the pathos of necessity. It focused on bread and welfare, on solving the problems of poverty and hunger, rather than establishing a durable framework for political freedom. In Arendt's view, when the revolution became about alleviating suffering, it opened the door to terror, because the alleviation of suffering can only be achieved through total administration and coercion, not through the free deliberation of citizens. The sheer force of the masses suffering drowned out the voice of political freedom, leading to the tyranny of Robespierre and ultimately the rise of Napoleon. It devoured its own children because it prioritized life itself over the political life. The American Revolution, in stark contrast, was for Arendt the true success story, though paradoxically, it had less impact on the world stage. Why? Because the American colonists were largely concerned with self-governance and the establishment of political institutions, not with overcoming dire poverty. They were not suffering from the same level of existential necessity as the French masses. This allowed the American founders to focus on the truly political task, the founding of a new body politic, the creation of durable institutions, the Constitution, the Republic, the system of checks and balances, that would provide a stable space for ongoing public action and deliberation. Arendt admired the spirit of revolution that animated the American founders, a spirit of deliberation, of constitution making, of creating a lasting structure for political freedom. They understood that freedom wasn't just about being free from oppression, it was about being free to act, to participate in public affairs. The American Revolution for her was a moment where the pathos of novelty, the joy and audacity of beginning something entirely new, was channeled into the creation of enduring political forms. However, Arendt also critically noted that even the American Revolution, despite its successes, ultimately failed to institutionalize the truly public spaces where ordinary citizens could continually participate in politics. The town hall meetings, the local assemblies, these vibrant spaces of appearance from the revolutionary period were largely not incorporated into the enduring constitutional structure. This, she argued, led to the decline of the revolutionary spirit and the rise of professional politicians, leaving ordinary citizens increasingly disengaged from the active life of freedom. So, revolution for Arendt is a rare and precious moment of new beginning, a rupture with the past, where human beings can discover their capacity for collective action and establish institutions for freedom. It is a moment of miracles, events that break with predictable cause and effect, demonstrating human capacity for initiation. But this freedom, once founded, requires constant vigilance and active participation to sustain itself. This brings us to the ultimate source of Arendt's hope, a concept she considers central to her entire political philosophy: natality. This isn't just about the biological fact of birth. For Arendt, natality is the profound ontological truth that human beings are born into the world as newcomers. Each birth is a new beginning, a unique individual entering the existing world with the inherent capacity to initiate something entirely novel, to break cycles, to surprise the world, to inject unpredictability into the flow of events. Think about it. The very act of birth is a fundamental challenge to the notion of historical determinism, to the idea that everything is preordained or that we are merely products of our past. Every new person carries with them the potential for fresh action, for a different way of thinking, for a unique perspective that can disrupt the status quo. This capacity for beginning, for initium, is for Arendt the wellspring of human freedom itself. The concept of natality stands in stark defiant opposition to the totalitarian project. Totalitarianism, as we discussed, aims to eliminate spontaneity, to render human beings completely predictable, to erase their individuality and reduce them to interchangeable units. It seeks to control not just the present and future, but also to rewrite the past, to make everything fit its ideological narrative. But natality is the constant, inconvenient reminder that newness is always possible. Even in the most oppressive systems, new individuals are born, bringing with them an inherent capacity for action that the system cannot entirely extinguish. For Arendt, action itself is like a second birth. Through our words and deeds in the public realm, we reveal who we are, confirming and taking upon ourselves the naked fact of our original physical appearance. It is in acting politically that we truly actualize the potential for new beginnings that is given to us by birth. The miracle of natality saves the world, Arendt writes, because it constantly renews the human capacity for starting something new. It ensures that even when old institutions crumble, when traditions fail, when the public realm seems lost to the forces of darkness, there is always the possibility of a new beginning, of new individuals rising to initiate new actions and create new forms of freedom. So the hope Arendt offers is not a naive optimism. It's a grounded, rigorous hope rooted in the very structure of human existence. It's the conviction that because human beings are born, because they possess the inherent capacity for beginning, for action, for freedom, then tyranny can never be absolute. And the possibility of revolution, of founding new spaces of freedom, always remains. This is not a passive hope. It's a call to embrace our natality, to exercise our capacity for beginning, to step into the public realm, to speak, to act, to resist the forces that seek to make us thoughtless and conformist. It's a reminder that even when the world feels overwhelmingly dark, the constant influx of new life, of new individuals, carries within it the seed of unexpected freedom, of unforeseen change. That, Project Mayhem, is why Hannah Arendt's work, despite its sobriety, is ultimately an exhilarating affirmation of what it truly means to be human. Don't waste your beginning. You've journeyed with us through the treacherous terrain of Hannah Arendt's mind. We've torn apart comfortable notions of evil, dissected the terrifying efficiency of totalitarianism, and rediscovered the unsettling truth of what it means to truly act as a human being. We started with the chilling reality that evil isn't always monstrous. It can be banal, a product of sheer thoughtlessness of a diligent bureaucrat just doing his job. This isn't just history. It's a stark, unforgiving reflection of how easily we can all become complicit if we abdicate our personal responsibility to think, to judge, and to question. We then peeled back the layers of the human condition, understanding Arendt's vital distinction between the cyclical, consuming nature of labor, the world-building durability of work, and the truly human, unpredictable action that happens in the shared public realm. This is a diagnostic tool, a way to see how modern society has inverted these values, pushing us deeper into consumption and administration, starving the very space where freedom can truly flourish. And speaking of that space, we explored the crucial interplay of power, plurality, and the public realm. Power for Arendt isn't domination. It's the collective force generated when diverse individuals come together to act. Plurality, the beautiful fact of our uniqueness, is its fuel. And the public realm? That's the arena where it all happens, the very stage for freedom, which in our increasingly private social media-addled world is dangerously shrinking. But through all that, we found the light, the defiant, resilient hope nestled in revolution, not as mere overthrow, but as the audacious act of founding freedom. And most profoundly, in natality, the simple, undeniable miracle that every new birth brings with it the inherent capacity for new beginnings, for fresh action, for surprising the world with the unforeseen, the ultimate antidote to a world that seeks to make us predictable cogs. So, what's the takeaway? Arendt's legacy isn't about giving you easy answers. It's about giving you the tools to ask better questions. It's a bracing, visceral demand for vigilance. A scream in the dark that if you retreat into your private bubble, if you let others do your thinking for you, if you surrender your unique voice to the clamour of the crowd or the dictates of the system, you leave a gaping void. And into that void, something truly terrifying will inevitably rush. This isn't about being cynical. It's about being awake. It's about understanding that freedom isn't a given. It's a constant, demanding act of creation. It's about recognizing that the biggest threats aren't always external monsters, but the subtle, insidious decay of our own capacity for thought and action. Hannah Arendt reminds us that the greatest bulwark against totalitarianism, against banal evil, against the suffocating weight of a thoughtless society, is you. Your capacity to think, your willingness to judge, your courage to step into the public realm, to speak your mind, to act in concert with others and to initiate something new. To exercise that profound, undeniable fact of your own natality. Don't let your mind be a passive receiver. Don't let your voice be silenced. Don't let your capacity for action atrophy. Because in a world that increasingly wants you to just consume, to just conform, to just behave, you need to think, to judge, to act. This is Pirate Radio for the Mind. And this is your mission, Project Mayhem. Don't fuck it up. Thank you for joining me on this little philosophical expedition today. You know that I deeply appreciate your presence and your attention. And if you found anything in this episode useful, or you think that someone else might find it interesting as well, then please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Here comes that hideous marketing bullshit, because we have to do this, unfortunately. But we are on social media, as much as I loathe those platforms. You can find us on Instagram, on X, and on TikTok with the handle @TheObservingEye. We're on YouTube, where you can go and watch our videos, which is youtube.com/@TheObservingEye. And we've also got a beautiful website on Substack, which is theobservingeye.com. So all of those platforms, you can go and chat to us and engage and comment and all the usual things that you can do with these social spaces. I've also got an email, which I'm not entirely sure is a good idea, but you can email me at david@theobservingeye.com with your questions or suggestions or anything you want to get off your chest about philosophy. Not therapy, I can't be your therapist, but I'm happy to field philosophical questions and existential horrors. That's all good. And I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can, which is normally within a day or so. Thanks everybody, take care, much love, and I'll catch you soon.